A whole host of stories really in the oil market, whether the US will touch the special pool of reserves, the Iranians are warning against that. But I put together oil volatility, and whatever way you cut this up, we're looking at more oil volatility. Let's take a look at it. It's in the GTV library. Down 8% from the highs. Is there going to be, are we trying to find a new market and political equilibrium for oil prices?
Yeah, I think following obviously the last OPEC meeting, following the Saudi decision on supply and so on, we probably are looking at a new equilibrium. We might see a slight rise in volatility. We might see a bit of a decline in oil. But I think one of the things to keep in mind, particularly for this region, is that the strong move up in oil that you saw from probably the 50s up into the 70s has not or was not really reflected in asset prices, both on the fixed income side and I guess to some extent even on the equity side.
Let's just dig into that a little bit more. This is one of the charts that you sent through, which is that relationship between oil and the GCC spreads. And we were just chatting in the break there. And to that end, you would say that that relationship, we are just playing catch up in that market at the moment. We are just playing catch up in the GCC spreads.
Yeah, I think that is very true, because you had, like I said, that move up from the 50s to the 70s. During that time, spreads in the GCC were actually increasing at the same time as oil prices were increasing. You know, it was caused by a variety of other factors: global emerging market weakness, outflows from ETFs, whatever. But the fact was that spreads were increasing at the same time when oil prices were increasing. The last couple of weeks, you've seen a bit of a change in that. You've seen good performance from regional bonds, and the spreads come back down. But as you mentioned, to me, that's just a little bit of a recognition from the marketplace that the overall credit quality in the region has improved following the increase in oil prices over the last couple of months.
So really just playing that catch-up game. When you look at Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you actually, I mean, if we tie this back, many people sort of make this relationship, as it were, between the bond markets here and the oil prices. We're doing that catch-up. Where are we in the Saudi story? Because we wrote a story the other day. They may come back with a monster sukuk. But where would you want to be in terms of Saudi bonds at the moment?
Yeah, I think if you look at the KSA curve, the most important or the most interesting part of it is the steepness of the curve. Particularly between the 10s and the 30s. If you compare the Saudi curve to slightly lower rated sovereigns like Indonesia, like Mexico, you see the curve is actually steeper in the sense that on the 10-year space, the Saudi bonds trade about 10 or 20 basis points tighter than Mexico and Indonesia and others, whereas on the 30-year place they trade flat or slightly wider. So they're about 20 bips of steepness in the Saudi curve, which we think is a bit too much. So we would play the long end, obviously on a hedged basis. We're not necessarily looking at taking duration risk. We just want to capture the spread. So we think that that's an attractive trade. The other trade, obviously, in the region, which is quite sensitive to oil prices, is Oman. Again, you've seen the move from sort of $50 to $70 oil, $70 being much closer to a fiscal break-even for Oman. You haven't seen that really reflected in significantly tighter spreads in Oman. So we think that there's some value, particularly in some of the utility companies like Mazoon and so on in the Oman market.